Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started? And what are they doing to stay there? And oh my goodness, we have another special guest today as I'm getting to talk to Dennie Laney. Dennie, well, she's the Vice President of Human Resources at Associa, and she also serves on the volunteer team for the HR Southwest Conference. And Dennie, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How you doing?
I'm really good. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I love starting the show reflecting. I was thinking about a couple things. And first and foremost, we've known each other for a long time. But I
Yes.
remember the first time I met you, and I want to see if you remember this. It was at the Plano Mayor's Internship Conference. Do you remember that event?
I do.
Yeah,
I
I had a
do.
chance to like MC that event, and you were one of the panelists.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was
I
a lot of
remember
fun.
you being there. I didn't realize that was the first time that we
Yeah.
met. Yeah.
Well, that may not have been the first time, but that was a memorable time. And I remember thinking, oh man, Denny's got incredible energy. I just love that. I want to get to know her more. And then, of course, we recently saw each other at Cindy Lou's Toast for a Cure event,
Yeah.
LLS fundraiser. That was a great event, wasn't it?
It was amazing. More amazing than I would have even imagined because I was very much so looking forward to it, but it turned out to be like a wonderful, wonderful event.
Yeah, that was I love that because I was able to connect with a lot of people who I've
Yeah.
seen and I've talked to, but I haven't seen them face to face in so long. And
Yeah.
just to get a chance to everybody connect, and it was all for that one cause. It
Yeah.
was just like it felt bigger, just bigger than an event, didn't it?
It really, really did.
Yeah,
Absolutely. You
yeah.
couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, Sandy Lou's fantastic. And
Yeah.
hey, I want to get into this, but I want people to
Okay.
know that are listening. For those who don't know about Associa, I would love for you to just share a highlight of your company and how you serve your customers.
Okay. Absolutely. So Associa is a community management company. So ultimately, we manage hundreds of HOAs across the country.
Hmm.
So we're one of the biggest in the business, in the community management business. I didn't know this business existed a year and a half ago, but it's been a fun ride. And we serve our customers. Our customers would be, our clients would be the board members of the HOAs. However, I've always come up, under the expectation that if you're not serving the guest, which I'm not, then I need to be serving someone who is. So my customers have always been, my internal community of employees in any organization.
I love that. I love
Yeah,
that because the customer can be not just the external, but the
that's
internal
right.
customer just as important. I love that. I appreciate you sharing that. Hey, like I said, I've known you for a little while. I bet there's some
Yeah.
things I don't know about you, and those that are
Mm.
listening would love to hear the Denny Laney story. Like, where did you grow up, and how in the world did you get into HR and leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up in restaurants. So I was in restaurant operations and I always had a desire and was involved in training, whether it was, you know, new team member training or, I just always really loved that. And I happened to be in the backyard of a very big organization and I wiggled my way into the training department of Brinker International, specifically Macaroni Grill, where I spent almost 20 years coming up through, starting with training new restaurant openings. I opened several macaroni grills, and then leadership development. And that really started to shape my path into HR.
I love that. Oh my gosh. I've had several Brinker, I think they Brinker heads on
Yes,
the show. I just Kelly Valade was on the show
yes,
recently,
yes,
who was there for a long time. Tony Bridwell, Roseanne Garza. I mean, there's more.
yes,
Those are just the first one. Diane Sanford. Those are just some that came to mind.
yeah.
That's fantastic. So okay, so tell me like what about after that?
All of those folks, by the way, are a part of my career path. So it's fascinating that you say that. And growing up at Brinker provides a very rich playground of leadership development and growth and learning. And so it's always been encouraged. So I had an opportunity to move over to Motel 6, G6 Hospitality, which is Motel 6 Studio 6. a life changer for me. Obviously, I had been growing up at Brinker, and I went over to Studio Six and learned a lot. That was my first introduction to a culture that was different than anything I had ever known before. So it was a great opportunity to grow, learn, and try to navigate in a space that was brand new to me. You know, I'm a forever long time learner, and so it was just one of the best opportunities that I had in my career, and really started to shape things. I jumped back into restaurants for another couple of minutes after that, before coming here to Associa, where I really did want to change lanes and, you know, expand into a different industry. And this has really given me the opportunity to do that here.
I love that. Well, I think that one thing that I think is a common thread, that high performers are continuous learners. And so when you
And
talk about
curious.
and curious,
Yes. I mean, you have to be curious, or there isn't any growth or any learning. So that's something that I really admire when I see that in others. When they're curious, it energizes me.
well, I'm curious, did you grow up in Dallas, or
No.
where did you grow up at?
I am from the middle of nowhere, Michigan, and literally my stoplight blinks. I went and got a degree at Western Michigan University in fine arts, of all things. I was a dancer on cruise ships. My husband was the piano player. He's from Dallas. So when we got off ships, I moved here with him, and we've been together 32 years, I think.
That is fantastic. You know, I just took my first cruise to
Oh,
Alaska,
okay.
and we took
It,
I think the Royal Caribbean, and it was, I really hadn't really had a desire to take a
yeah.
trip on a cruise, but my brother and his wife invited us, and it was fantastic. We had such a great time.
You
I didn't
know,
realize that. That's fantastic.
I find that people, like, there are cruisers, and then there are, I don't like to do cruises kinds of people, but if it's your thing, it is definitely an experience. And living on cruise ships was also an experience. I was
Oh.
just out of college, so
Mm.
I was young and good with whatever came my way, but it was a magical experience for sure.
I love that. I tell people all the time, it was like floating on a five-star hotel. It was
Yes.
the best experience ever. And I
Good.
just loved it. And everybody working on the ship
Oh
was
yeah.
like delivered this five-star experience. They just loved what they did. It was fantastic. You know, I've had another guest from Michigan, Mary Dale, a HR leader from Michigan as well. And so I have never been to Michigan. Like, I have this bucket list of these areas, the different states that I'm trying to hit all 50 states, and I'm about 15 away. And Michigan's still one of those states. Do you
Well,
ever get back?
you have to go like on this side. Don't go on this side. Go
Oh,
on the, this is really pretty up here. And that's how everybody does the states. This is a really good side. So stay on Lake Michigan.
I
Yes,
love that.
I get back there all the time. I have uh, a family that is all, they live within 5 miles of each other. My
Mm,
niece lives across the street from my brother. I've got
that's awesome.
a niece and four nephews and seven greats. So I will be there in just a couple of weeks.
I love that. Well, let me ask you this. I always like to talk about purpose. I mean, here you are. You know, you're advanced in your career. You're doing some amazing things. But I always like to ask, was there like a moment when I don't know, you found your calling, you found your lane, your
Yeah.
purpose in your career? Was there a
You know,
moment, or were the moments?
there were moments, I think, you know, kind of to your point about the cruise ship or coming up in restaurants. Obviously, in order to be successful or happy in that capacity, there has to be a desire to serve others, right? Because
Mm,
that's all you're doing all of the time, and quite thanklessly sometimes in the restaurant industry. After my husband and I, it became very clear for us that children weren't going to fit into our side of things. So as my niece and nephews were coming up, I went through, this is funny, I went through this generational training at Brinker, and generational differences. It was kind of the beginning of when people were starting to talk about that, because this was a very long time ago. I started practicing that content on my niece and nephews, and it was like working for a lack of a better term, but they were responding to me in a very real, like authentic way. And it kind of dawned on me like, okay, I could start applying this stuff because, we all go through so much leadership development and training and concepts and models and tools. It clicked for me that the application of those things really worked. I think was when I started finding my interactions with people more meaningful because I was able to practice some very, very simple in many cases models or, using tools that were provided to me. And, that was really kind of the moment that it switched. If you really do these things, it really does change the lives of the people that you're interacting with.
I love that. I wrote down, you have to have a desire to serve others.
Mm-hmm.
My late uncle, he always said, he was a football coach, and he always said, I can issue your football pads, your helmets, your cleats. I can issue you everything you need but desire.
Yep.
And and when you said that, I'm curious. Like, okay, so I love how you said, you've kind of cracked that code, right? You've been able,
Mm-hmm.
now all of a sudden you're able to connect in a different way. For those
Correct.
listening, like, I don't know, what was one of those tools or maybe one of those tips that helped you? Because there's probably some people right now going, I need to figure out how to communicate or connect with a different generation, and maybe it's a young generation connecting with the older generation.
I think the generational piece is still very much so at play. I think people-centric folks like myself, when I think about, all of the tools are running through my head. Oz Principles changed my life. Tony Bridwell, he was at Brinker much later than I, but he was my Partners in Leadership Oz facilitator. That was a game changer for me, both personally and professionally, because that concept, it's to see it, own it, solve it, do it from an accountability perspective. But there's also a results pyramid, and it really speaks about people's beliefs. And all you need to do is create experiences that give them the belief that you'd like them to have. So that's a really powerful tool. Strengths Finder is a big part of my coming up. And, the important thing about any of these things is, like I say, in the application. So understanding your strengths, that's great. But what does that mean, both personally and professionally? For example, I have a lot of influencing strengths. In fact, woo is my number one strength, which is not a people strength, it's an influencing strength. So I am happiest when I'm working and communicating and all things with people, with and through people. So yeah, those are just a few that come to mind. All of them are good. It's just a matter of, finding where it fits into or is relevant to what you do.
Yeah, I love all that. When you're talking about awareness, I think that's one of the most important things. When I started becoming more aware of my strengths, I remember years ago when I was a young manager, I remember I just got out of college and I was working in operations, and I think the general manager was trying to figure out where to track, set me on a track. He said, "Hey, Bruce, are you more operations or more sales?" And I said, "Well, and I wasn't aware." And I said, "Well, I'm kind of a little of both." And he set me on, I'm balanced, right? And he set me on an operations track. And it was great. I mean, I learned operations for, 8 years. And then I moved over to the sales side. And that's really when I started accelerating. And so sales
Well,
may have been, but if I didn't have the operations, it wouldn't have set me
correct.
up, right?
Exactly what I was going to say. Yes, it's I call myself Opscentric. I don't know if that's a word. I made it up, but I
I love it.
am. And I think that that's probably has a lot to do with, well, number one, coming up through operations of some sort, but I think it has a lot to do with how I was developed at Brinker because they were so Opscentric. So I have found myself in situations since Brinker where operations doesn't quite know what to do with partnering with the people side of the business. So I've used my influencing skills in some ways as I've got myself partnered up with operations because that's how I work. I partner with them so that people are successful in regards to delivering on the results the organization wants. So
yeah, for sure. For sure.
Operations is my lane for sure.
I love that. I love that. Hey, I want to real quick ask you, maybe were there a couple of people you mentioned there were several people at Brinker? Were there a couple people that kind of stood out as mentors that have helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I don't know if we can do it. I wouldn't want to have gone it alone, to say. I think, if I think about the changing lanes from operations into training, my first corporate leader was Leslie Smith. She was the director of training. I have no idea why she brought me to the office. I mean, I don't know what I would have done without her. And then, yeah, I along the way, I had leaders again, at Macaroni Grill. There's so much mentorship just by the nature of the types of people that worked at Brinker. I had a gentleman, John Reale, who was the president of Macaroni Grill. He really started to shape the way I would maneuver in my career because of the partnership with people and operations.
I love that.
So without him, I might not have ever known how to navigate in that way. Tony Bridwell, he's my mentor and hero, as I always say. My president at Muya, when I went back into the restaurant business after Motel 6, we had partnered together at Macaroni Grill, and then he was the president at Muya. He brought me over because he wanted to bring forward some of those things that, we came up with. So yeah, you can't do it alone. My current boss is a real mentor to me. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to work with her as well.
I love that. I love that. That's fantastic. Yeah, I think that's the common thread for leaders that are really making impact, is that they all talk about they couldn't do it alone. They have people that have helped them along the way. And I like to talk about that. Number one, I love to hear guests share this information, but I also think it's important for people that are listening to say, hey, you know what, you've got to develop a network. You've got to get some people around you to either mentor or mentee or both, and just be part of that process. Hey, let's shift over to leadership. I want to talk leadership. When someone says, Dennie, what's leadership to you? How would you respond to that?
Leadership to me really has to do with showing up for people in a way that they need you to show up, and having that sense of awareness about the impact that you're having on the lives of others. I read a statistic recently that was so interesting about my well-being at work. Like 77% of people say that is a direct reflection of their leader. Sometimes I think leaders don't know what they are to those that they lead. And I think having that awareness and being deliberate in the experience you're giving to those that you're leading, so that they can be their best selves, both personally or professionally, whatever they desire, that I do what I can to help them get to where it is they want to be, is really leadership for me, is just being there for them in the way that they need at any given time.
I love that. Showing up for people. Write that down. If you're listening right now, get your journal out, get your pen out, write that down. And I love that. 77% of well-being is a direct reflection of a person's leader. I would agree with that. And I'll tell you, when I took my job, I'm going on 20 years at Armstrong. And when I took that job, I remember thinking I wanted to work for the leader. That was that. So I had a couple of different things that were important to me, but one of them was to be surrounded by good people and be reporting to a great leader. And so I agree with all of that. And I think that's probably why we're on a mission to help others.
Yeah. It's funny. I've said to many leaders before, just please be thinking about, what is it like to be on the receiving end of you? At any given moment, what does it feel like to be on the receiving end of you? And if you're thinking about that whenever you're with, maybe you recognize your stress level is, getting higher, or you're getting frustrated, but still, what is it like to be on the receiving end of you? We can all relate to that.
I love that. I want to shift real quick to, we talked about changing lanes. A lot of times we talk about changing lanes. Maybe it's in transition, maybe it's in development. Hey, we need to get better at something. But I want to focus on just that perspective. Maybe even transformation is where this would fall into play. But when it comes to perspective, like you just talked about, hey, we need to think of things differently. How can someone, like, we have all this stuff we have to do? I mean, you're busy. We're all so busy. We have so much to do. I don't know, maybe what's a tip that you've done or you've seen others do or that you share with people? How can you like change lanes, change your mindset, change perspective on the way you view others?
That's a great question. I think some of us might never get there.
Mm,
It's really a choice, and
mm,
this is what I say. You have to care. If I'm talking with one of my employees about a challenging leader that they have at one of their branches, let's just say, and I kind of take a step back and go, do they care? Because
mm,
if they don't care, then this point is probably moot, and there's not going to be a lot of mindset change. There's not going to be a lot of growth. I think listening, being a really good listener and letting people feel heard and making
mm,
sure that they feel seen is is helpful, because without trust there is no real belief that
mm.
what I need to do, or my thinking needs to change. And so, I'm really big on building, that trust of safety.
I love that. Hey, I want to ask you this as you were sharing that. I think about one of the things we're hearing a lot about right now is feeling a sense of belonging.
Yes.
And is when people were maybe come up to you, or maybe there's some listeners out there right now, they want to feel like they belong to something bigger. Like, I don't know, what's some perspective that you share? Like, how can they change lanes? I mean, I guess the question is going to be, how do they know whether they need to change their perspective or change their mindset, or maybe they just need to change their job or what they're doing? Any thoughts around that?
I do. So when I think about, feeling a part of something bigger, I believe it's really important for leaders to help connect people to what they're doing as it relates to a bigger purpose. So, I don't know if you're, serving an HOA board, or you're serving, a customer who's ordering a burger, or whatever those things are. There's got to be a bigger, more global picture of how I fit into this, and how what I'm doing serves others and is important to an organizational, you know, um, mission, vision, values, tying
Mm,
that. Those can be really powerful things if they're really in play. They can be buzzwords too, but if you really do have a mission and bringing people along and how they fit into, being a part of that mission, I think is really, powerful and valuable for people.
yeah, I love that. And I think that's important. I think people are just trying to figure out how to like feel connected to something bigger. Like, I feel like I'm part of something bigger. And you mentioned values, and we all have the values on our walls, but how can we relate those values and share those stories to where people can really feel that sense of,
Yeah.
I don't know, community.
Sure,
So
community.
I
That's
love
a
that.
that's a that's a great word.
Yeah.
And I really encourage leaders to the point of community is to really get connected outside of
Mm,
their organization, because that really creates perspective.
mm,
We get like kind of in our little tunnel vision of what's going on in our world. And when you connect with others outside of that, you go, you take a deep breath.
mm.
I'm not the only one, or, there are challenges everywhere, or, you get, um, you get a little focused in on what's going on within your own organization without a broader sense of community. I think the community can really lend itself to perspective.
Well, getting outside the organization, you also serve. You've served the Dallas HR community. Today, you're serving the HR Southwest Conference. Talk a
Yes.
little bit about, like, why is that important to you, and how did you how did you change lanes? I mean, because I hear the reason I want to ask this question is because a lot of people want to do that. They're like, hey, I'd like to do that, but they just can't figure out how to do that. They don't have time, or they have all
Yeah.
these different things going on. How did you talk a little bit about changing lanes, and how hard was that? And what does that mean to you?
It's funny because I had a leader once earlier in my career, and she was always like, you really need to network. And I don't know if people understand that there are folks that don't know what that means or
Mm.
how you go about doing that. And so I remember I was in the L&D space at the time, and so I was going to a lot of L&D, trying to get into different organizations, and it just wasn't clicking for me. And then I got a visit from Callie Miller, who we served together on the board. She came, I think she was cold calling us as an organization for what she was doing at the time. And she invited me to a Dallas HR event. I have never felt so welcomed. I mean, it was amazing. So, to your point, if you show up, your network is going to grow. It's a little intimidating, no matter what, it's going to be intimidating. But at Dallas HR, anyway, in my experience, people were so open. Like, I didn't stand in the corner by myself while little groups of people were, who knew each other, were speaking. And then I did the best thing. This was the biggest transformation, is I joined the education committee. And once
Mm.
you get involved in a real meaningful way, it like feeds your soul. It feeds my soul. Like, I say
Mm.
that to my boss all the time. I was at an HR ed session meeting the other day, and my boss texted me because she knows. And then she was like, how's your meeting? I'm like, I didn't realize how bad I needed this, just to
Mm.
get around, my network of people.
I love that. I heard Sarah Blakely, the former CEO of Spanx, she shared, the more you experience, the more you can help others.
Yes.
And I get, that's what I'm trying to let people know, is that, like, I love how you said it. You talked about leadership is about showing up for others, but you also need to be leading yourself. And that's about showing up
Yes.
for others, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And I don't, to your point, we get so busy, and, you know, once you start showing up for others, it actually becomes a habit. It's not
Mm.
something,
Mm.
it creates leadership behavior habits, if you will, that, maybe you have to think about it for a while, but then ultimately, even inside the grind of the day to day of when you're busy, there's just an automatic way of stopping and showing up.
This is fantastic. Showing
Yeah.
up for others. We could talk about this for a long time. This is fantastic. I love that. Hey, I do want to ask you a couple of things. One of the things that you had posted something on LinkedIn about psychological safety and how innovation is impossible without it. I'm just curious your thoughts
Mm-hmm.
for those listening. I know that's kind of been one of those topics out there. Any thoughts around psychological safety? Because I think it
Yeah.
also aligns with what we're talking about, having that sense of
Mm-hmm.
belonging, right?
Absolutely. It's funny. I think I came across psychological safety during COVID, in some meaningful kind of way, because I think that social injustice and all of the things that started happening, we started engaging differently as in the workplace, if you will. Different types of conversations were seemingly okay or should be okay. And so it made me start thinking about psychological safety, and how, if I feel like anything I'm going to say is going to be um, not only just judged or shut down, but just, not listened to, then number one, there's no trust. And,
Mm.
when there's no trust, there's no innovation and there's no collaboration, because
Mm.
you can't have innovation without collaboration. So you need to have those walls that are broken down, that allow people to feel free to come to the table,
Mm.
um, all of the same opinions are the same regardless of who you are in the organization. And I think I was experiencing leaders who, a lot of leaders like to be in control, and during the pandemic, in that lack of control over what was happening, I saw some psychological safety walls kind of go up, because we were having a harder time showing up for people in the way that they needed, because I was going through something myself. We were all kind of going through our own thing. And so, I just think of psychological safety as a space that's safe and isn't going to be, ideas and thoughts aren't going to be judged, or all of those things will be heard, regardless of whether we apply them or not. They're heard.
I love that. And, we talk about, even when people feel like, hey, I belong to something bigger, a lot of times it's just what you said. Hey, my voice is heard here. My ideas are heard. Maybe they're not used, but they hear me
Yeah,
and they respect it and they value
sure.
me doing that. And I love everything you're sharing. Hey, what about, last thing before I change lanes here or shift. Hey, I want to ask you, like, what about for people that are listening right now and they are dealing with that? Like they're going to a boardroom, and I've seen this before where I'm like, hey, let's bring this up. And someone says, no, don't bring that up. Just report your numbers. And that's all they want to hear. How does somebody like get through that? Any thoughts around that?
I think that getting through that is dependent on the culture of an organization.
Mm-hmm.
We all have to make decisions for ourselves in terms of the organizations that we decide that we want to be a part of. And in some cases, if what you're describing is really starts to no longer align with my own personal values, then you have to make decisions for yourself, because some things, might not be able to be changed. I talk a lot about the sphere of control and the sphere of influence. And if you're frustrated by the things that are out of your control, um, we just have to make decisions for what's best for ourselves and our own well-being, and, being brave enough to make that decision and make a change if that's what's, what you're needing to do at that point in your career.
I appreciate you sharing that. I know there's somebody probably listening right now that's like, I needed to hear that. I'm just like, I'm in a different place and I'm just trying to figure out, find my lane, I guess, if you will. Hey, I want to ask you this question because there's probably some people that are listening. Maybe their early career, mid career, but they're thinking, I want to continue to grow and I want to develop to become a vice president of human resources or a leader in the organization. I don't know, any tips that you that have helped you along your development? Because I know when we talk about development, that's your lane. Anything you would share with the audience about what they might think about doing to continue growing in their career?
I think, there are a couple of things, at this point in my career, as I look back, um, I think patience. I know that
Mm,
sounds crazy, but there has to be a good amount of patience because things will come in their own time.
mm,
For me, when I was earlier in my career, things weren't moving fast enough. I wanted to be promoted. I wanted to have, all the things. And eventually when you take a deep breath, stay patient, keep learning and stay curious, it'll come. It'll come. We all have a lot to learn. And so keep learning along the way. It'll come if you're patient and you're continuing to learn and grow, which is not always easy
yeah,
when
I
we're ambitious and
yes, patience. I love that. Patience, young grasshopper.
right.
I love that. Oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. Hey, before I shift over to it's time to accelerate, I always like to ask my guests about advice because I learned so much from my guests. Have you ever been given any advice? It was just so good. Maybe it was early career, mid career. It was so good. You just find yourself sharing with others.
It's all the things that we've been talking about, like the be patient or being given opportunities. It's been more than words, it's been actions for me, just in that being given opportunity is like better than any words could be, so not necessarily one thing, but I just think, that whole idea of being patient and making sure that your number one thing is to serve others and not yourself, I think
Mm.
is something that is advice, or an experience that I had at Brinker when it really was always about others. And that's probably the thing that I've taken with me most, um, most cherished, is just that whole idea of serve others.
That's fantastic advice. I will tell you that when I'm talking, especially to college students, they'll say, "Hey, what's a tip?" And I'll say, "Listen, if you just serve." And let me just tell you, sometimes serving is just giving someone a smile. Like, it doesn't have to be big, but
that's what I always try to tell leaders. Like, it's so easy. It is so easy because it takes very little. We are simple people. We just need a little attention. I mean, my boss says that all the time. People don't want feedback; they want attention, and that's so true. So I love that. I love that.
I do too. I heard one of my former guests, Suzanne Myers, said it's the easy, hard stuff, because you just said it's easy, but yet it's so hard, right? Because if you're not focused on it, it's very hard. But if you're focused on it, it's very easy to, hey, you know what? I just talked to Dennie and she's passionate about this. And I come across an article or something about that and I share that. Like, that's really easy. But if you're not focused on serving her, it can be very hard. And so I love that. This has been so much fun. I'll tell you, I could go for hours with you. You are so energizing. I love this. I'm going to shift over to It's Time to Accelerate as we conclude the show here. Hey, first question I like to ask is, would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast?
I hate aging myself. Read a book. I'd rather read a book.
So. I love it. I love it. You like underlining, highlighting, folding the corners of pages.
Shush. Yes.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yes. I love that. Hey, I will tell you, I've given some presentations around great leaders or grateful leaders because I think that's a very common thread. What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for so much. I'm grateful, first of all, I'm grateful for my health and I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for the opportunity for this, this position that I'm given today, because it is like another transformation in my career. I'm learning so much. And I'm just really thankful for that. And, I'm thankful for my HR network. I'm just, and I'm really thankful for my team. I have an amazing team, by the way, like the most amazing team.
I love that. They're going to appreciate you sharing that. I bet they're grateful for you too.
Oh, I hope so.
And I'm grateful for you for coming onto the show today and just sharing perspective, because I know people are going to get a lot out of this. Hey, I do want to ask you, I've been energized by this conversation. What energizes you, like maybe outside of work?
Cooking. I love to cook. I love to cook. I'm pretty social, so I have a pretty social calendar, so that makes me happy. Getting home to my family is probably the most energizing thing that happens to me, where I just take a step back in time, because that's kind of what it is, and just appreciate things slow and, surrounded by people that I love, and that recharges me anyway.
I love that. I love that. Hey, last question. Dennie, 10 years older, is around the corner knocking at your door, and you're going to go answer that door. What's she going to tell you?
I think she'll say, you were good enough. Like, don't fret. Stop fretting.
I love that.
Don't fret.
Don't fret. It's going to be okay.
That's right. You're good enough.
You've done a good job. I love that. This has been so much fun. I appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your perspective. Hey, someone heard you share something today that they're like, you know what? I want to connect with Dennie. I want to follow Dennie. How's the best way for someone to connect with you?
LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So yes, absolutely. I'd love to hear and connect with anyone who is so desires to. That'd be awesome.
Love that. I will put your link in the show notes. And when you connect with Dennie, be sure and let her know you heard her on Life in the Leadership Lane. Let her know like something she shared. That makes the connection so much deeper. And so again, I appreciate you. I appreciate everything. I can't wait to see you at the HR Southwest Conference. That's coming up October the 15th through the 18th. If you want to know more, you can register at hrsouthwest.com, get involved, and hey, it's going to be a great time. So Dennie, I appreciate you, and mostly I appreciate your friendship.
Thank you. Same. I appreciate you, Bruce.
Awesome. I can't wait to share this. I'll talk to you later.
All right.